Starting here, what are we looking at? These are going to be some of the support items for a tool cart I want to build. And when I say tool cart, I don't mean a tool chest or even a box quite like this one, although we're heading in the right direction there. What I want is something more like this. Okay, but what the hell is that? Let's go through a real quick history on this thing. It is a generic cart for, I don't know, pantry stuff probably. This ended up evolving a fair bit when I cut up a bunch of PVC pipe, screwed it to the top shelf, and then JB welded the hell out of it, bedlined it, and made this tool holder situation that you see now. It also has these pipes on the side with drain caps on the bottom, and those hold tools pretty nicely. We've also got this towel holder, which has come in super handy. A little bit of Dynamat on the bottom of each shelf because rolling this thing around was untenably loud. And to keep it from tipping over, first off is an ammo can full of bolts. And there's also a pressure plate bolted to the bottom. That about covers the changes to this cart, and I've had a very good experience with it. The only problem is that I can never leave well enough alone, and this has given me quite a few ideas for improvements. But this time I have so many ideas, we're not going to start with an existing product, we're going to make something from scratch. We've got 3-inch casters, a paper towel holder, drawer slides, foam tape to go on the outside, toolbox liner, and more PVC pipe that was used for the tool holders on this guy. For structure, we've got a bunch of steel that didn't really fit on the workbench over there, including 1/8-inch angle that will make up the majority of the cart. Not everything is completely planned. Some of this is just going to be playing it by ear, seeing how it looks once it's actually a physical thing in front of me here. But there are a few things I had to write down to figure out specific dimensions. Overall, we're looking at 22 inches in length, 14 inches in width, and including the casters, 36 inches tall. But we're going to talk through it all as we go, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is section this piece of 3-inch inner diameter PVC pipe. We'll try to get 90-degree ends on this thing. We'll see how well that works. 12-inch section, 2 3/4. This last guy we will cut to 20 inches. Yeah, that's as good as we're getting. That's enough with these for now. We'll put them aside. I think I want to build the top of the tool cart first, because everything else will kind of end up getting built around that, I suspect. And I really want to get a sense of the size and shape of the whole thing. We're going to be starting off with this 1.5 long, 1/8 of an inch thick steel angle. Now we're going to switch to a piece of 1.5 inch steel bar. This is also 1/8 of an inch thick. That first set of pieces is cut and everything is laid out. This will be the main work surface area. This will be tool storage, and this is where the pieces of PVC pipe we just cut are going to go. That's the gist of it. There's some little pieces like this here and that in there that need to be trimmed, and obviously we've got some overlapping stuff going on here. What we're gonna do is 45-degree cuts. I've marked out a bunch of these pieces with some pretty arcane nonsense. Let's fire this up and get that done. Now it's up to the belt sander to finish off some of these edges and smooth things out. We've got some things set up here. I'm just gonna start tacking the corners. These are kind of handy little clamps. I just got these recently. They're for woodworking, but it seems like they are working pretty well on this thinner material as well. Everything is tacked in place now. I am actually really happy with how square everything is. So we're gonna go ahead and fully weld this. The top of this is largely completed. We'll do a little bit of cleanup for sure. And sitting on this table, it's actually pretty much exactly 36 inches, which is going to be the height. I'm pretty okay with how that's worked out. I drew out most of the rest of the plans here. Now we have dimensions to work with, and I think I know how this is all going to go together. What we're going to do right now is cut some more pieces. Those are nice and even and are going to be our 4 uprights. Next we'll take the flap disc to any of the welds or anything else that's sticking up here, try to give this a flat surface to work with. Now we're going to attach our uprights. I think we might just kind of eyeball and free form this. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. We're gonna go ahead and make the cross pieces. These are gonna be 1.5 inches, just like the top. That should be all of the cross pieces we're gonna need. Let's go ahead and tip this thing over. That should be able to pull everything in squarely. We'll go ahead and see what happens. Gotta cut those corners off, didn't think about that. Alrighty, that is the bottom in place. It's a little bit parallelogrammy, I think. Gonna set this on the flat part of the concrete floor and see if the hammer can teach it a lesson. It's cool to finally have a sense of the size, although it will be 4 inches taller with the casters. I just did a test fit of these pipes to make sure they're a nice tight fit. Right now we're gonna go around and grind down all of these welds. It's all cleaned up now. Next we're gonna make the middle shelf. To mount these casters, I think we're gonna have to fill these corners in. We'll just make little squares. These aren't the finest fits in the entire world, but they will work. That about does it. We'll let all this cool down, grind it flat, but I don't actually think we're gonna drill for those just yet. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with this bottom shelf. We have a few of these big angled pieces of 1/8 inch steel. That material is gonna make up the entire base. We've got one of these abrasive paint strip wheels. Hopefully it doesn't blow up in my face. And we need to mark that to 11.25 by 9.5. We're gonna cut 2 of those down. They fit in here pretty nicely. I'm gonna go ahead and clamp these on and weld them to the bottom of our cart. I had to stare at this for a while, but I think I figured out what I want to do for the weight mount. Basically, I'm looking to build in the option of attaching a hunk of metal to the underside of the cart in case it feels top heavy, much like the pressure plate and ammo can were used to stabilize the old model. We'll take this piece of 1/4 inch steel, cut it right down the middle, make 2 straps, drill holes in that. We're gonna go from 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, and then stepped up to 27/64. And now we're gonna tap all 4 of these to 1/2 inch 13. Let's go ahead and get this thing cut in half. Cut bits of this 1/2 inch all thread. And now we're gonna thread a nut onto each of these studs so that we can kind of tighten it down into the plate like a bolt and fill that in with weld. We are gonna go ahead and hit that with some primer. Just want to coat the underside of these plates. Probably doesn't matter, but may as well. We'll set them where we think they need to be and get those welded in. We're gonna set up our casters. The wheels came with these serrated nuts, which I don't love. They're pretty shallow. These flange nuts I dug out of the bin, and they were lock nuts. Just took them to the belt sander. We'll mark the centers and drill these out to 3/8 of an inch. Now we can get that welded in. That is looking pretty satisfactory to me. We're gonna go ahead and just test fit the casters. It actually kind of feels like something now. It's funny how that works. Not that the floor here is super flat, but definitely needs some shimming between those two though. We've still got a ways to go, but I'm pretty happy with it. And on the flat areas of the floor, it's actually totally solid. And against all odds, it's actually not too bad. And even the lower shelves seem about the same. The somewhat unfortunate thing that this means, at least for me, is that now I'm gonna move on to something else, and that's where this guy is gonna come in. This is a 4x8 sheet of 22 gauge, which should be thin enough to bend. Hopefully it's sturdy enough. The drawers in this thing are 22 gauge, but they're also machine bent with all these little edges and lips and stuff to give it strength. I'm not gonna be able to do that, so I think we're just gonna cut out a piece of this and see what happens. You can see that this thing got damaged. I used that corner for something else. We'll just start on that side. We could definitely use 10 snips for this, but it's gonna curl the edges. I think I'm just gonna use the angle grinder to cut this out. Kinda smells like campfire under there. Before we clean anything up, we will take out these little extra bits here. We'll clean that up just a little bit on the belt sander. Alrighty, the real question is, can I bend it without totally messing this up? Luckily, this part should be easy since I went and bought a sheet metal brake. Wait, no, I didn't. I did get this hand seamer for the little corners and tabs and did some shimming to get the jaws actually aligned. But we're just gonna completely wing this. It's not sharp, but not horrific. Now for the tricky ones. I'll be damned if that doesn't look like a drawer. We are a touch wide. Workable, maybe. There was something I was supposed to do. Drill these so I could plug weld them. Didn't do that. The welder's on its lowest setting. Well, that's it. It came out better than I expected. And really the whole operation went well enough that for better or worse, we're gonna have to make 2 more. We better just go ahead and get it over with. I did see a little bit of smoke at one point, but none of the cardboard turned into an inferno or anything, and I only kissed the concrete a couple of times. We'll be drilling for the plug welds ahead of time for these guys. Now we've got some cutting to do. Let's start bending. Pretty happy with that. You can see the length difference there, and certainly the height difference. And now we've got some welding to do. I think we're gonna go grind down the welds on the outside to make sure that none of them interfere with the drawer slides. The drawers are mostly done. The last thing I think I really want to do is trim the handles. I'd like them to be maybe half this length. I'm gonna use this piece of strap so that if I cut through, I don't go all the way through or anything. We're gonna do some belt sanding, round off some other stuff on these, before turning our attention back to the rest of the unfinished cart, starting with the change to the large PVC tool holders. I got another 24-inch section, which is gonna go here, and then we're gonna have 3 12-inch tubes. The big thing we have to do is build the frame that the drawer slides are going to bolt to, and that'll kind of set up everything else we need to build around them. They're notched just a little bit in the corners. That should be pretty strong. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to make this little shelf. I'm just gonna start building it and see what happens. We've got some funky looking pieces. It'll support the 3 12-inch pipes and just kind of go around the longer one. Measure that out and weld it in place. I think we're gonna use the same process to build a very similar cage right here for the second set of pipes. Here's that bottom bracket. It's maybe a little heavier than I wanted it to be, but it should be plenty strong. And we're about ready to weld it in place. It's gonna end up right there. I've got a bunch more of these little squares, and we're gonna fill in the corners on this shelf. That fits on there nicely. I already went and cut these supports. The problem is, those brackets are gonna run into our tool storage space. We're gonna cut another piece of angle and weld that right there. And that should be a nice space for our side brackets. These are looking reasonably good. I think we're gonna flip this over and weld the other sides too. And that takes care of the rails on that side. Now we need 3 12-inch straps for the other side. We'll get these slotted in and welded. That took some doing, but we finally have somewhere to mount our drawers to. Here is a 12-inch slide, and there's a 14-inch slide for our bigger drawer. They're not an exact match, they're not the same brand, but they're very close. Nothing on this is straight, and the drawers are janky sheet metal, so hopefully these can accommodate for a little bit of wonkiness. This is a 3/16 bit we're gonna use to drill those out. We're using these little number 8 stainless screws, lock nuts, and probably just have washers on the drawer side. Okay, let's mount this and see what happens. That's a pretty good amount of wiggle room there. We'll mount the top slide on the other side of the frame now. Now we just have to figure out how to get a drawer in between them. It's a bit of a tight fit. It's a little bit wide at these front tabs. Yeah, it's a little tight. Is that gonna be a problem? I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and drill that one. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. Now we're gonna mark another one of the slotted holes on each side. It's not too bad. And from there, it was a process of making small changes to each corner of the inside and outside of the slides again and again and again, until the drawer spacing, position, and movement felt about right. And to make sure we don't lose that setup, a third screw will help lock it in. Now all we have to do is that exact same process 2 more times. It has been an astronomical pain in the ass, but I think the drawers are in there pretty nicely. Top drawer, middle drawer, bottom drawer. There's probably a better process out there. I'm obviously not an expert at this. They're not in there incredibly straight, but the drawers themselves aren't incredibly square. We've got a gap on the right side. When this is all done, it'll have foam strips around the edges, so I don't think that'll be too noticeable. What we're gonna do is drill the not slotted holes so that the slides can maintain pretty close to their perfect setting when everything is disassembled and reassembled. We need to make sure they're not gonna hit the PVC pipes. I know these front ones do, I already tested that. I don't want to drill with the rails installed because I'm trying to keep as much debris as possible out of these ball bearings. These frontmost ones, I'm not going to be able to get a nut on the back of. We're going to try to drill and tap them, which is going to mark the end of our drawer adventure. There's still plenty left to finish on the frame of the cart, but first, we're gonna get a little bit sidetracked and build something that's gonna be a kind of important part of the system. It'll be a tray that hangs off of the side. We're gonna need a way to mount it to this one. We're gonna start with a pair of threaded inserts that we took over to the lathe and turned down. We're gonna have one of these at each corner, and right on top of them is this 1/2-inch steel tubing. It should look something like that. We're gonna go ahead and cut our tubing to length. Here's the idea. This will get welded into the corner. Those aren't pretty, but the idea is the bolt drops in, so you can hang it off of there, but if you want to, you can lock it in place. We're gonna use this 3/4 of an inch angle to make the work surface. We're gonna go for 12 1/8 by 16, so just a little bit shorter than the main surface. Here's the basic idea. Angle over here, flat piece on top. You should be able to just take the whole tray and slot it in, maybe. To give these a sharper inside angle, we're gonna notch that inside corner until the overall thickness is the same as the sides at 1/8 of an inch. Now we gotta cut these to length. Weld these in place over top of everything else. Cut off these overhangs. Do a notch out of this top section. And now we're going to be drilling for our 2 mounting bolts. I'm actually pretty happy with how this came together. I thought of a million different ways to do this, but I really like the idea of having the option to just set it in place or fully lock it in place. I think it's time to assemble the frame. I'm gonna start with some notches. Okay, we're gonna hold this in place and tack it. Our frame is fully welded. There's a bit of an upward angle here, because when you put weight in this, it's probably gonna flex some amount. This is 25 pounds, but that's probably more weight than I really should put on this. Okay, the bolts are all the way out. Right now we've got a downward pitch. Let's see what happens. Seems just fine with holding 25 pounds. I thought a bunch about retaining these and different ways to do it, and I came to the conclusion that it's more trouble than it's worth. So loose bolts it is. I did consider having this tray flip up. I've seen some commercial units like that, and then you have a bracket thing underneath to support it. But I wanted this to be like quick detach. I am pretty happy with how this has worked out. We're gonna be farther reinforcing this, and I'm gonna try really hard not to overkill this like I always do. I think just an X. Here's an unsurprising dilemma. That's just not gonna do. So I'm gonna cut one of these welds. Tension is totally taken out of it. What I'm gonna try to do is just clamp it down really good, hopefully not have the same problem. That seems to have done the trick for this thing. Good enough for us. We're gonna use 1.5 inches for this top surface. We've got one final X to make. It's going to be for this middle shelf. That's pretty much done. This is a bit of a random detour, but I decided I wanted a way to mount that tray to the side of this. We're gonna weld 2 nuts on each side here. This is a little bit under-engineered, I must say, but this was very much a last-minute thought. One of the last big things we need to do is cut out the 22 gauge steel skins for this tray, this shelf, and I think we're gonna cut out pieces to cover up some areas of the cart. That means there are quite a few pieces to cut, and we're gonna use cardboard templates because none of these things are square. I don't really wanna rely just on measurements. It's tempting to just leave it because it's pretty sturdy. Of course, we're gonna make it steel, but first, we've got to sort out some PVC pipes. Just like how these pipes sit in this side rack, we're gonna have a selection of pipes in the back rack over here, and this is gonna be a little bit more complicated because we're gonna have a few different sizes, and I don't know the exact orientation. It's just gonna be whatever happens to fit in here based on what we have sitting around. I think we've worked out a pretty good setup here. It is a snug fit, so much so I actually broke this guy. I'm gonna have to figure out how to get him out because we wanna do some more finish work. What we're going to do is cut out some wooden plugs using different sized hole saws and boards of various thicknesses, since a few things like these wrenches are gonna need some height assistance, and so that they're not just hitting the steel bottom. I made a list of all of the plugs we're going to need and took all of this apart. Replaced that broken pipe. And we're gonna start coring out some random pieces of wood for the task. That'll take care of the larger plugs without any significant drama, and for the smallest ones we can trim down a piece of dowel on the lathe. After a lot of hole cutting, we are left with quite a few wooden plugs for our pipes. Some of these fit well, but not all of them do. Some sanding is in order, starting off with smoothing over the edges of the pipes and then fine-tuning all of the various plugs to fit snugly. We definitely made a mess in the process of doing it, but now all of the PVC pipes have end caps that are going to get epoxied in place. That's all of those stuck together. Purely for aesthetic reasons, I do want to fill in around these mounting posts. It's at least a little bit smoother, which is better, maybe. There's pretty much just one last thing to do before painting it all, which is cutting out the steel plate, the same piece of 22 gauge steel we used to make the drawers. We're gonna have to do some fine tuning to get them to fit, which we're mostly gonna do on the belt sander. Now that we've got our 3 main pieces fitting nicely, we're gonna trace underneath them so that we have an outline of that support structure. Mark out a bunch of holes to drill with a 1/4 inch bit because these plates are gonna get rosette welded to their frames. We'll give this a coat of weld-through primer because once those plates are in place, it's gonna be impossible to get under them. Clamp down the first side of this. We're gonna work our way one side to the other. You won't see the ugliness because this will always have toolbox liner over top of it. I guess we'll take this out and get to drilling. Right now, I want to get the PVC pipes in here. The basic plan is to put a bit of JB weld along the bottom here so that when these are pressed in, they squish it. Okay. I'm gonna mark out this little rectangle and I'm gonna sand that because this is where it was a tight fit before. Now we've got these 3. These are not a super tight fit, so they will need more JB weld than the rest of them, but we'll make it work. The only thing I did want to add on top of that was 2 vertical screws through this main piece of PVC because it wasn't quite sitting in the corner. And now we've got to work on getting the smaller tubes in place in the primary tool rack. Still a little bit of play, and I just want to fill that space up. This is 90 thousandths Lexan. It'll keep this pretty snug. All right, that's about gonna do it. It's not the prettiest. You can see the scraps of Lexan in between some of these smaller tubes. And along the edges here, all the smaller tubes especially got a coating of JB Weld as well. For now, the tool cart itself is going to get set aside as that needs to sit for at least 24 hours. And in the meantime, we're going to get back to this. The idea for this auxiliary tray isn't just as an addition to this tool cart. This will slot into a frame, and that will act as a very low profile cart that you can roll under a car with you. I think it's a really cool idea. Will I actually use it? I don't know. We'll see. The basic idea is to use these angled pieces of 1/8" steel, weld that to a 1/2" tube steel frame with these 2" casters right in the corners. And after some extra trimming and sanding, we have a docking station for the tool tray. This whole thing is sanded and really ready for paint. I just went ahead and pulled off all of the clamps. It's been probably about 36 hours. Everything seems really solid. So after just a few finishing bits, like trimming this pipe down to be flush and wiping everything down with some acetone or something, we'll give a first coat of paint. I keep saying paint, but what we're actually going to be using is the truck bed liner. It's pretty durable and the texture can hide some of my mistakes and crimes. While we give that first coat about an hour to dry, we'll start spraying down all of the other parts we made, including these sheet steel panels we cut out and set aside earlier that will finally be joining the party. Facing the already painted sides inward, we'll be drilling and riveting those to the sides of the cart to give it a significantly cleaner presentation. That looks pretty good and feels pretty solid. You just have to do it a few more times. On 2 of the panels, we'll be adding bends to stiffen their unsupported areas. And the left side will be drilled to allow access to the threads underneath. That fold over we did for the back seems to have helped make it a bit stiffer. The drawer was getting pretty close back here, otherwise we would have left it at an angle like this one, which made it much more solid. And now that we have the panels attached, I think it's about time we figure out what to do with the paper towel holder. I think we're gonna cut this base and mount it something like that to try to keep it in close to the cart, but also out of the way. This mounts via 2 screws, kind of crazy how short these are, to this backing plate, and that's what you would mount to the wall or whatever. We're gonna do something similar so that we don't have to tighten screws from the inside. But to get this towel holder to sit where I want it, we will be cutting it at an angle and drilling it and tapping it for new screws. I decided to reuse a piece of the original aluminum bracket with a bit of trimming and drilling, and we'll transfer punch those holes over to the cart frame, tapping them for 832 mounting hardware. Here's our little intermediate plate. That's going to get screwed onto our paper towel holder. This plate's going to get mounted right here with 3 screws and 1 rivet. The rivet is definitely not related to the fact that I broke off an 8/32 tap in there. Damn it! Nothing to do with that at all. I put a nut on there, get a little bit of extra space from the rivet gun, and we can fully tighten the towel holder to the cart. Although, with the leverage of the full assembly, the strength seems a bit lacking. I need to remake this out of steel. Okay, that seems pretty good. With that steel bracket, it is way sturdier and I have no issues leaving it like that. We'll clean up all the metal shavings, wipe down the bare steel, and give this whole thing another coat of paint. We'll do 2 passes with it upside down, let it dry overnight, then give it a final misting right side up. All of the other parts will also receive adequate attention, and hanging out in the sun will help the bed liner cure faster. 3 days later, it was time to start assembling for real, and we'll kick things off with the tool tray. We'll custom fit a sheet of toolbox liner, coat the underside with spray adhesive, and press it down nice and evenly. The tray dolly will have its wheels reinstalled, and with a bit of glued on toolbox liner as a final touch, we can make sure the tray seems happy in its auxiliary home. The cart itself is next up for the liner treatment, and we'll be gluing in form-fitted sheets for the top, middle, and bottom shelves. And of course, the drawers will receive the same level of attention. Then we'll strategically lay out the foam tape weather stripping on corners and flats to help protect anything this tiny tank is rammed into. Next is installing all of the drawer hardware on the cart side, as well as on the drawers themselves. Theoretically, these should be in very close to the same positions as the last test fit, but in reality, and with a few coats of bed liner moving things around, there was another round of minor fiddling and manhandling required to achieve satisfactory operation. With this drawer that opens at the farthest, it's probably 30 or 40 pounds I'm putting on it. It's not like it's dying to tip over. Okay, yeah, I really want to know how much it weighs. With 3 pounds of lifting gear and a 35-pound weight on the bottom that I later removed, this thing weighs just under 100 pounds. Yeah, it is not svelte. It has taken way longer than I expected, which should be my motto at this point, but we're done. The tool cart is as finished as it's gonna be, at least for now. We might make some additions later on. I couldn't figure out a good way to have a trash can sort of deal mounted to this, and I thought on and off about a way to make this mount to it, but decided against it. Let's show off the final model. First up is the shop towel holder, a whole bunch of tool holders, a nice solid work surface up top, 2 12-inch drawers that are each 2.5 inches deep, and below them is a 14-inch drawer that is about 5 inches deep. Now in here we've got 2 shelves, full size, other than the pipe that extends into that corner. And accompanying the tool cart is this low-profile roller, which can be disassembled, allowing it to be lifted off and dropped into place on the cart. That gives us an extension to the work surface, and it lets you hang it over an engine bay. And a cart just like this one can be all yours for the low price of, I don't really know, I'm not making another one. That is pretty much the whole sales brochure. What we need to do now is add some tools. Most of them we're going to transfer over from this tool cart, which I have just noticed seems to be a bit unhappy with the amount of weight on it. This cart was a fantastic proof of concept, and I don't regret building it whatsoever, but it is distinctly outclassed by its beefcake brother. The layout is definitely going to change over time, but this seems like a good set of commonly used tools that I want to have at my fingertips. And of course, there's the towel holder, which seems to be relatively wind resistant. As for the drawers, these can be used for these storage organizers or whatever I'm working with at the time. And what we can do, because of all the steel here, is use magnets. I also intended for this front tool holder to be a cup holder, but turns out I put so much bed liner on there that these water bottles don't fit as well as they did. But obviously it hasn't been used yet. So the only way to know whether or not it's gonna work is gonna be to give this some time and beat the crap out of it. It's been a couple of months since building the cart, and it has been used a whole lot. Overall, I've actually been very happy with everything, and the drawers have been super useful. There are a few things that tend to float around up top here, like some kind of a spray bottle and socket adapters. It does a great job at holding pretty heavy stuff. It's got 4 of these fully loaded organizers here and another one at the bottom. I love having bumpers on the corners of this thing, but as you can see, my choice of material hasn't worked out great. So I looked around for something else and found this. These are typically sold as baby proofing, which is honestly pretty applicable to me. We're gonna peel off the old corners and stick on the molded ones that I should have used in the first place. They look good. We'll keep on using the cart and see how those hold up over time. Fortunately, they have stayed stuck so far, and not much else about the cart has given me trouble. But that's never stopped me from meddling before, and the more time I spent with it, the more ideas bubbled up for improving space efficiency. Toward the end of 2024, I finally ended up with a 3D printer, and pretty much the first things I designed were these socket organizers made specifically to fit my most used 3/8 impact set. That cleared out the top drawer for these holders, which helped to sort out the previously perpetual pile of combination wrenches. But the bolt turners didn't end there. I had been assembling this set with a plan to add them to the cart's arsenal. Not a simple task, however. The problem is, they don't really fit. They could just barely sit in this drawer, but that kind of sucks. I've got all of the non-ratcheting wrenches in here, but the heads of these are so big they wouldn't fit in that slot anyway. So, what I've decided is to hang them off of the side of the cart, like so. We will be able to fit all of the wrenches as long as we have the smaller ends facing up. My original plan was to turn a bunch of aluminum down, but I did just get this 3D printer and want to try to design stuff on it. So, I don't know exactly how strong this is going to end up being, but I think it's worth a try. The machine is too small to make the hanger in 1 or even 2 pieces, but once all 3 plastic slabs are ready, we'll drive and epoxy in screws to reinforce the smaller hanging pegs. Will that be enough to stand up to normal use though? It doesn't seem to have a problem with the weight or some jostling, but with the leverage of the long wrench it isn't too difficult to ensure a bad time. Printing with more infill, a stronger material, and at more of an angle would have helped, but the screws do make a big difference, making these smaller pegs arguably the strongest ones. I was also worried about the mounting points, but farther destructive testing confidently classified that as a non-issue. Not invincible, clearly, but I think it'll probably be strong enough. I do actually kind of wish I had put screws through all of them, because it adds a lot of resistance to breaking at the layer lines. All that's left is to epoxy everything together, using zip ties and clamps to hold it steady until it's ready for a coat of bed liner to help it blend in. With that ready to install, we'll make room by trimming back the interfering foam tape. Then it's the drill's turn, punching holes for entirely too many fasteners, all that's left is populating the wrench rack and putting the cart back to use. So far so good on the durability of the 3D printed parts. They haven't been treated too nicely over the last year, but they're still hanging in there. The same can't be said for the tool tray dolly. After using it a handful of times, I decided that it was not actually that useful to have the tray lift off, and the whole thing was simply too small. While okay for basic jobs, more complicated ones quickly got out of hand and left you digging through a pile. So I decided to abandon the modular approach and make a dedicated floor cart, starting off with the biggest appropriate piece of steel that I had sitting around. This was the lid from a server rack drawer, and once the hinge and lock cylinder have been removed, we can eyeball the overall size, which looks like a great upgrade to me. Of course, we can't just bolt the casters on like that. We'll be cutting off the corners, and using more bits of these angled 1/8" plates to construct raised platforms for the casters that will allow the work surface of the tray to sit low to the ground. 1/2" square tube will create a perimeter to box in and reinforce the whole thing, and pretty soon we've got a sturdy frame reminiscent of the modular one, but a step up in numerous ways. We'll honor the deprecated unit by harvesting its casters, and once the new one has been prepped, they can be bolted on for a test. It rolls extremely well, maybe a bit too well at times. It's a minor problem if you're on a hill, I suppose. But it should be perfect in and around the garage. This is probably too thin for me to stand on, right? No, maybe not. After a few coats of bed liner and a precision cut sheet of toolbox liner, the cart will get assembled for real. Unlike the previous model, which would require piecing together, this one can sit under these toolboxes ready to go at a moment's notice. This has been an extremely useful addition, and I wish I had thrown one of these together a decade ago. It also plays nice with the socket organizers to make it much easier to keep track of those roly boys halfway through a project. When things get complicated, it does still fill up, but it's a major improvement over the first version despite the loss of modularity with the cart that this video is supposedly about. As for it, there's just one last change to cover. Due to switching tools around in the cart's PVC holders, some of the ones made purposefully shallow with 1.5-inch wooden bases started to get in the way, so I decided to intervene. This cheap 40mm Forstner bit should do the trick, except for the fact that it's too short to reach the bottoms we're trying to thin out. To help extend its reach, I made this press-fit jig, which uses a pair of locking screws for extra stability, that'll sit flat on the belt sander table and give us a nice consistent guide to abrade the round shank into a nice extension-compatible 1/4-inch hex. Finally, we can run that down the tool holders to set them all to the same depth. It does seem a bit silly to go through all of that work just to get a few tools to sit an inch lower, but this project leapt well beyond sensible territory years ago. So it only makes sense to bounce back to when it was first put into service to see why the heck I followed through with it all to begin with. I'm pretty happy with this project overall, but what about the videos? Well, I guess I wanted everyone to be able to follow along to maybe give you ideas, inspiration, tell you what not to do, but probably most of all to show that anyone can do this. Is it practical? No, but you can do something crazy like this and go all out building an absolute unit. Obviously, you can buy stuff like this, you know, maybe like this guy back here. I picked this thing up on sale and I've been super happy with it, but after using it as a kind of mobile tool cart thing for a little while, it just wasn't what I was looking for. It's a bit too big and was probably part of what kicked off this whole desire to build the perfect one. Every time I pull out a ratchet, wrench, or screwdriver, I can tell myself, yeah, I did that. Which I'll also have to tell myself every time I look at the drawer alignment. I guess what I'm getting at here is that sometimes if you have an idea in your head for an improvement or totally new product, maybe you shouldn't wait for someone else to do it when you can get out there and build it yourself. Let's go ahead and make that happen. Once I plug the saw back in. We're gonna run a thread chaser through these just to make sure that they are all happy. I should have seen that coming. Crisis averted. Accuracy is like my whole thing. Why are you guys so worried? Good enough, he said confidently with no idea if it was actually good enough. Oh God. Table's not on fire yet, that's a good sign. What?